Hello and welcome to another edition of Diaspora Weekly. My name is Jermaine Nkrumah and you're watching Diaspora Network Television. We're streaming live on Facebook at DNT Diaspora Network Television. You can find us. You can also follow us on WhatsApp. The number is on the screen, but let me give it to you. 027 208 3688. Actually, the 3688 is not by accident. The 3688 on the pad stands for DNTV. So if you forget our number, it's simple, 027 208 DNTV, which translates to 3688. Follow us on all our social media handles. Today we have a great show for you. I have an amazing interview, and that's not my word. That's what other people are saying. An amazing interview with Her Excellency Dr. Aricana Chihombori, former AU Ambassador to the United States. But as usual, before we get to the interview, guess what? We have a jangle, and boy, do we have something for you to think about. Stay tuned for the jangle. Okay, so for the jungle, why are we talking about a soccer game or here in this part of the world, a football game? Well, guess what? You saw a team playing a defensive game. We've all seen where a team plays about, 80 minutes of regular football, and then they decide to go on the defense. They play defensive game, and eventually, guess what? The game is played on their half of the field, all right? The other half is bare. In fact, the other team's goalkeeper can sometimes come as far forward as the center because the game is only played on their side of the field. And after a while, whatever they were defending, which is a goal, inevitably happens. We've seen it over and over and over again. What does this mean? Here in Africa, we spend enormous amount of time thinking about what other people are doing to us. Oh, the Chinese are going to take over our land. Oh, the white people are coming here, they're taking our resources, blah, blah, blah. And then we spend our time defending, doing all kinds of things. And some will even say that we don't even defend. We just sit down and let them take it. But the fact of the matter is, the game is played on our turf because we are constantly in a defensive posture. So while we are thinking about what others are doing to us, ask yourself this. Do the Chinese ever spend a minute thinking about, oh, those Africans, what are they going to do to us? Are they going to take over our land? Do they think about that? No. Do the Americans spend a minute thinking about what Africans are going to do to them? No. Do the Europeans spend a minute thinking about what Africans are going to do to them? No. Because they don't have to play defense. All we think about is here today. And so the game is played on our turf. So when are Africans going to sit down, put some people in a smoky room, pay them? All your responsibility is think for Africa. Just think. Strategize for Africa for the next 50, 100 years. And then when we strategize, not that we're going to do anything harmful to anybody physically, but how to also play an offensive game for a change. Let other people worry about what we are going to do to them. Why? Because we have the manpower, we have the intellect, we have the resources. So why are we constantly playing a defensive game? Why can't we play an offensive game for once? Because if the other team has to worry about you scoring on them, they spend some of their resources defending rather than spending 100% of their resources playing offense against you. This coronavirus has done something, and I hope Africa wakes up after a long, long, long slumber. If this coronavirus and what it has done to the world doesn't wake us up, I don't think anything else will. For the first time, let's start to strategize, think, We don't have to always think about today, what we're going to eat today, how much money we're going to steal to go put in their land. And when I'm feeling sick, oh, I'm going overseas for medical checkup. Today, fly overseas for medical checkup. Let's see. Let's see how you fly overseas for medical checkup. Somebody told me that an African official had a surgery in Germany, and the bill was $500,000, and he paid it cash. You know what? These stories go all over the place. We have the land, we have the resources, we have the manpower, we have the skills. You want to tell me we cannot put a very, very state-of-the-art hospitals all across this continent so that our professionals, the doctors and nurses and all those medical practitioners of African descent, cannot come back home to help? Ironically, when they say, oh, I'm going overseas for medical checkup, first of all, it takes you a minimum 6 hours to fly to Europe. Anything can happen, and we've seen some politicians die in flight. When a trip from your house to a closer medical facility will be shorter to save your life. And get this, when you go so-called overseas for medical checkup, the doctor that's taking care of you is an African. The nurse is an African. Boris Johnson recently was admitted to ICU. And he himself said it was foreigners that took care of him. We have the people. We have 210 million people of African descent all over the world. I'm not talking about those who live on the continent. These people have acquired wealth. They've acquired skills. And they're working for somebody. And we worry about people coming here to take what belongs to us. Corona, thank you for arriving. I'm thanking Corona for arriving because for the first time, it's got us thinking. It's got us thinking that we can make a mask that works better than what others send us. It tells us that what we do here in Africa is superior. But sometimes we sit down and have others tell us our products are inferior. We just proved to you in the previous episode that our products are actually superior. The food we grow on this continent, over there they call it organic. We don't have to put any pesticides to it. They grow naturally. And they come in here, they want it. But we don't want that. I don't want plantain, I want fried rice. And even rice, we want the imported one. When we have some here. What is happening to us, people? Look, maybe it's just me, but I'm telling you, you have a continent of 1.1 or 1.2 billion people. A huge majority of them are poor. That's a fact. But yet, 33% of the resources that the world needs is found here on this continent. This is the time to stop playing defense. Let's put some people together, let them think for us on how Africans will get to play offense so that other people will start to worry about what we're going to do to them so that they don't spend 100% of their time doing to us. And for today, this has been the jungle. And oh, by the way, don't forget, remember DMT, mask up. Today, all over the world, if you go up, you have to mask up because you can put people in a room forever. The economy has to start. But we know one thing. If we mask up, we control the spread. So mask up. And that today is the jungle. We'll be right back with my interview. Dr. Aricana Chihombori. Stay tuned.
Newsroom brings you 30 minutes of the most topical, fact-based, and up-to-date news from Ghana and around the world. Politics, business, sports, and news from the diaspora, all covered in this comprehensive bulletin. If it matters, DNT.
Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to speak with the Iron Lady. The Iron Lady. And who am I referring to? Her Excellency Dr. Aricana Chihombori, former AU Ambassador to United States. She has started an organization called ADDI, African Diaspora Development Institute. For the first time, this is a credible effort to galvanize the entire African diaspora to play a role in how we rebuild Africa. By her own words, she said it was an amazing interview. So I'll let you be the judge. Listen up.
All right, this is Diaspora Weekly. My name is Jermaine, and we are blessed once again to be joined by, now I'm the only one who can call you Iron Lady. I hope no one else can call you that.
I'll take it, thank you.
Okay, my dear sister, Her Excellency Dr. Aricana Chihombori, welcome please, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Very good. Today, I want to get you your views on a broad range of issues, starting with Africa today. You carry a lot of weight in terms of what the of the world.
You're breaking up. Can you repeat that again?
Okay.
Can you repeat the question?
I was saying that, okay, today we want to talk about Africa, a broad range of things, but let's start with Africa today. How do you see Africa today within the realm of the global stage?
Well, Africa is the origin of humanity, and it is the content everything and anything the world could ever need. Africa has the largest population, or the much needed manpower that the developed world is struggling to have. Africa has all the resources that the world could ever need. Africa is a continent that could actually feed the entire world. Africa is a continent that can actually have the entire world. So we're sitting in an amazing continent with some amazing people. Our youth entrepreneurs, we are just, they're bursting at the seams. So Africa is full of untapped talent. And of course, you know, from an investment point of view, I think it was 2 years ago, the first 6 growing economies in the world, top 10, the top 6 were in Africa. And so we have a continent that's on the move, a continent that, if allowed to make our own without interference from outsiders, is a continent that is ready to take lead of the world, which we really is something that we should have been doing a long time ago. And leadership of the world belongs to us as Africans, because we are the origin of humanity.
Okay. We often hear of what others are doing to us. If you look at our issues, is it a case of what others are doing to us, or more so what we are doing to ourselves?
No, we also have blame to bear. Let's make no about that. But what I would like for us is to also prioritize, take a list of all our issues, prioritize on a scale of 1 to 10. It is my humble opinion that the one they like to highlight, which is corruption, I think it's more like a level item 5 out of a scale of 1 to, until we address issues 1, 2, 3, and 4. 5 is not going to work until we look at the root cause of why Africa is where it is today. Face it, people are not aware of the billions of dollars that are coming out of Africa every year from multinationals who are hiding all their funds in tax havens. billions of dollars are getting out of Africa from tax havens. The majority of multinationals doing business in Africa places. We have a simple case right now going on in Zambia, the Glencore. Glencore has been mining copper and other minerals in Zambia for decades, and they have not paid taxes. They send all their funds to tax havens. They underreport their productivity. They underreport what they are selling those commodities for. It is happening all over the continent. These multinationals have been getting away with murder for really even before independence for the young African nations. That's just tax havens. Then you pick up illegal mining. The extractive industry, there's so much illegal mining that's going on throughout the continent, more billions of dollars. And I'm talking in excess of hundreds of dollars just from illegal mining, from the sale of illegal sale of plant animals. So those illegal activity going on, nobody's talking about them. And then we go to the big one, where the majority companies that are controlling the African economies, they are owned by companies that are based in the former colonies. So if a country is a former colony of Britain, the majority of the employers are British companies. If they were French, the majority of the major employers are French companies. And so Germany. And so we look at the bigger picture. We still don't have control of our economies. So let me use an example of Glencore. Glencore just sent home 11,000 employees because they are mad at the government for forcing them to pay taxes. Do you realize what that's going to do? 11,000 people being by the company because the company want to pay taxes, and they're just retaliating against the government. A lot of that is going on. So the president of Zambia, kudos to him for standing his ground and saying, no, we're not going to take it anymore. If the average Jane Doe on the street is paying taxes, you, the big multinationals, you too must pay your taxes. Everybody else, the rest of the African countries must do the same. But unfortunately, creation is severe, and the consequences ultimately affect the leader. So you might find that in many cases, leaders may want the right thing, but they are handicapped because of the control that this multinational have.
Okay,
Francophone
so,
countries.
Okay, so I'm saying all this are going on. We've gone to school with them in their territory. We know how they operate. We have an organization called African Union. And so when the leaders meet in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, you would imagine that this is what they would be talking about and saying that, look, I'm from Ghana, you do that in Zambia. If they come to Ghana, I'm not going to give them way. If Nigeria is saying the same thing, if Glencore cannot get it done in other places, eventually they'll play ball and do the right thing. So how come we are not doing that when we allow them to continue to do this?
If you notice that all of my conversations conference, that was precisely what the Berlin conference was trying to accomplish, to divide that in such a way that it is very difficult for us to work together. It's unfortunate that in 1963, our Pan-African fathers failed to reach a consensus on this issue. However, all is not lost. 2018, the African Heads of State agreed that we must speak with one voice as one Africa, as one continent. But when it's all said and done, all politics is local. The head of states, after they leave Addi, go home to their own nations and face the realities on the ground. Even on the ground, there are multinationals, and some of them are now owned by some of who are basically controlling the economy, and the president has to navigate that terrain very carefully, otherwise there will be consequences to him. And when the consequences do occur, it comes in as the leadership failing with the masses complaining. Like, for example, in Zambia, 11,000 people being sent home. I mean, that's just really bad. And what is the president supposed to do? How is he up those 11,000 jobs overnight? And yet Glencore is supposed to be paying. So you'll find that realities on the ground after the leaders meet in Addis are different. And president is facing different challenges in their countries. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we don't have some leaders who are not doing right by their people, but I can honestly that the majority of the African leaders are doing well by their people. What I take issue with is to just do a blanket statement about corrupt African leaders. That is not true and it's not fair. So we need to talk about issues. Each country is facing challenges. Let's call a spade a spade. Let's talk about specific issues pertaining to a particular country, and get all of the continent and paint them with one brush. I have problems. Okay. And I think it is a strategy that used to use us Africans as instruments of our own self-defense, because when we start to constantly talk negatively about Africa, we're now becoming their mouthpieces for what they have been doing all along, just painting Africa with a negative brush. I'm not going to be part of that mouthpiece, and I hope that all of us can make a commitment to say we're not going to be used as for our own self-destruction. Let's talk about our issues, but country per country, because the issues from one to the other. The challenges are different.
Okay, so what do we do about it? I mean, you mentioned that all is not lost. When you talk about leadership, you started talking about it when you had the platform as the African Union ambassador to United States. But for all intensive purposes, they actually terminated your contract because of that. What does that say about leadership and our ability to face the truth head on here in Africa?
And like I said, my brother, you are a journalist, and I would hope that you can report the news properly. The heads of states did not terminate my. Let's get that clear. It was one person.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Right.
It was one terminated my contract. That is Chairman Musa Famat. It was not the heads of states. So again, make sure your reporting is accurate. So the decisions of one man cannot be used and applied to the rest of the African leaders. He had his own issues. I can't speak to him. Whatever his reasons were, we have been through that. We are past that chapter, moving on. But like I always say, it was time for move on, honestly. I think what I came to do in Washington, I accomplished to the best of my abilities. We're now on the second chapter and we're moving on.
Okay, but you would agree with me that Mr. Muhammad Faki, he works at their pleasure. So if they weren't complicit, they would have asked him to call you back.
Well, again, you have to realize that they cannot be dictators. He has the authority to terminate any contracts for anybody who is under his jurisdiction, so to speak. So as we serve at his discretion. So if they have to come in and interfere, then they're eroding his powers, which is not right.
Okay, very good. I want to shift to a subject that sometimes get lost in the conversation. We often talk about leadership here in Africa, but let's talk about followership, the people. Do we get it enough? Do we understand the global angle when we're talking about where Africa should be?
When you say we, are you referring to Africans on the continent, Africans in the diaspora, or Africans in general?
I'm talking about Africans on the continent, the followership of all of the leaders. In other words, the leaders make a decision, it affects us, and the way we vote them, the things that we vote them about, do Africans on the continent, do we get the global angle?
Well, first of all, when you say we, you got to define who is we. Are we talking of we in leadership that are working with the president, and also we, the citizens? Do we, the citizens, understand when we complain as citizens? The citizens?
Yeah, we're talking about the citizens. Yeah.
Yes, the citizens, from my experience, when I started talking about the continuation of colonization, I was amazed at the percentage of people, I'm talking close to 90% of the people addressed. Most of the time, 100% of them, nobody would have heard about it. I once gave at an adult class at Johns Hopkins University. There were about 50 former CIA employees, former State Department, former members of Congress. And by the time I finished, one guy got up, he says, I've been in diplomacy for 50 years. How come I never knew about the Pact for the Continuation of Coalition. He said, I thought I knew Africa, but this one eluded me. He just didn't know. People at the highest level were not aware that France was committing such crimes yearly, and nobody was questioning what they were doing. And so we might kind of know what's going on, but we're not piecing it all together in a manner that tells a story. So we really know what the root cause of Africa's problems. Rather, we are being made to concentrate on the leaves and the flowers and the branches that are falling off season in and season out, when we are not going to talk about the root causes. Why is this an ailing tree? By that tree, I'm talking about Africa. Go to the root causes of why Africa is where it is today. The only way Africa can survive is when all the boundaries are eliminated. When a young man in Djibouti can take off and job in DRC. When a young man in DRC is free to go look for a job in Egypt or South Africa. The continent is ours. Our young people should be able to find opportunities wherever they can find them on the continent. Let's use an example of the United States. United States realized that as little states, they could not survive on their own. Utah survive and yet Delaware and Togo are, Nigeria equality with Texas, but even Texas could not survive on its own. So they come together as the 50 states, plus of course Hawaii 51, they come together and became the United States of America. If one can get a job in Tennessee, they have a better job maybe in California or in Michigan. We need to get Africa to be the same way. The little economies can only create this many jobs. Past a certain point, there's no more that they can do. So we must open the African economy. The children of Africa must be free to move around the continent. That's why I keep emphasizing that the African Continental Free Trade Area must be supported and it must succeed, for it is our only hope. And it is finishing that our Pan-African fathers were attempting to achieve in 1960. So total unity, opening up of Africa, a united Africa, if wishes were horses, that's ultimately what would save Africa from the doldrum and the abuse and the exploitation we are receiving from the East as well.
Okay. First of all, I share your vision of a united Africa. I think a lot of us look at that as the way to go in the future. But when you look at the different leaders and their characteristics, you have dictators on one side and you have free thinking, I guess, democratic leaders. Do you see a possibility where I am king in my country, but with the United States of Africa, I'll become negligible, unimportant? Why would I sign on to that?
Well, again, that now goes down to the individual. How committed are you to the Pan-African agenda? How committed are you to the continent? It should never be about us as individuals. We must also remember that if one is chosen to lead, you are supposed to lead. If you are leading a country with 30 million people, your responsibility should be to the 30 million people, first and foremost, and not you, your individual, and how you feel. At the end of the day, it's about our survival as a race. Africa survives. An Africa that is thriving is an Africa that equates to a respected African. And when I say African, I'm always referring to all African descent on the continent and outside the continent. A respected Africa equates to a respected Black people. So we would hope that we can all mature to the level that we understand when given the opportunity to lead, irrespective of your own personal feelings. So it's a growth process. It's not going to happen overnight. We are a family. Some of us will get it sooner than others. What we hope is if we keep preaching and keep sending the same message, slowly on, more and more of us will begin to get it and begin to unshackle our minds of the legacy of colonization.
Do you think the Musevenis of the world and the Paul Bias of the world will ever be convinced about this?
Again, I can't speak to a specific in the president, but I can speak to it in general terms. I do know that President Museveni is a very Pan-African man. He speaks the truth. He says it like it is. President Biya, again, I'm not very familiar with his views, but I can speak to some of them, know how vocal President Museveni is, and I'm only going what is out there, what he has said, and the positions that he has taken. So again, to a specific president, but all I can say is this is work in progress. This is an African family. We need to list our issue, prioritize what is priority number 1, 2, 3, 4, and execute accordingly. And trying to execute in a haphazard manner, we are not going to get anywhere. An agenda for the continent in a very strategic manner, implemented with measurable results, short-term and long-term, but with a definite end to say 20 to 30 years from now, Africa must be a first world. We take each sector, healthcare, divide it into regions. How many people are in Southern Africa? How many hospitals are there today? How many hospitals do we need to treat this many people? Set out to build medical schools with training centers and train our doctors with measurable results. Let's do the same thing with education. Let's map out the needs. So we do something every sector, but we should have a plan, continental plan, for every that is measurable year in and year out, and a definite goal to be achieved by a certain time. We bring in the African diaspora, we can achieve that goal. The continent does not have enough capacity to achieve such a continental agenda unless we bring in the Chinese or the Europeans. There is no need to do that because the diaspora are already willing to come in. And that's where Addi is coming in to organize the African diaspora.
Okay, we'll be getting to the diaspora in a moment, but before we do that, my question on this African unity thing is that you place a lot of you place a high premium on the African Continental Free Trade Area, the ACFTA. Please do us connect the dot between that unit and African unity. How do we go from ACFTA to the United States of Africa, if you would?
Well, as you can see, the process of bringing Africa together is multifactorial. It's not something that we can do overnight. Trade is the big one. It's a really, really big one. Until we are able to trade with each other as neighbors, as African continents, there's no way Africa is going to develop. It's all part of the Berlin Conference. So the heads of states agreed that we must be able to trade with each other. The Afrexim Bank is coming up now with a program that you can, it's a digital currency system that somebody in Malawi can buy a commodity in Nigeria, pay in the Malawi kwacha, and the seller is going to be sold, is going to be paid in Nigerian naira. So now we are slowly opening the market. So I can see that digital currency implemented. Trade is the first place to start our conversations. There are layers to it. The next layer would be a single African currency, a single African central bank, a single African monetary policy, a single African stock exchange. They have to be done in phases, a single African military. So it has to be done in a very strategic manner, because this is a huge continent. When we look at the currency, as much as it is needed right now, the reality is even the EU, when they were coming together as the European Union, one of the biggest problems they faced is trying to rush into creating the euro. And they were only looking at about 27 countries. So in Africa, you're looking at 55 countries trying to integrate their currencies. It's not an easy task. And it's something that can also guarantee that the AFCFTA is not going to succeed. So everything has to be strategic and well executed. The heads of states in the discussions that I've been privy to, they're pretty much aware of that. They understand the challenges, and I still feel that a diaspora that is actively involved can also help facilitate the process of getting a truly Africa.
As the national regulator of the communications industry in Ghana, the National Communications Authority seeks to ensure an environment that is safe and fair for consumers and service providers. NCA grants licenses and authorizations for operation of communication systems and services, develops guidelines to streamline communication activities, establish and monitor quality of service indicators for operators and service providers. NCA is in 8 regions: Accra, Tamale, Takoradi, Kumasi, Ho, Koforidua, Sunyani, and Bolgatanga. Do you have unresolved complaints with your service providers? Contact us on 0800110662, 0307011419 between the hours of 8 o'clock a.m. and 5 o'clock p.m. from Monday to Friday, or visit our website at www.nca.org.gh and follow the procedure for filing a complaint or submitting inquiry. National Communications Authority, Communications for Development.
Good luck on Hello Entertainment Box.
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 Newsroom brings you 30 minutes of the most topical, fact-based and up-to-date news from Ghana and around the world. Politics, business, sports and news from the diaspora, all covered in this comprehensive bulletin. If it matters, DNT.
Hello and welcome back. Amazing stuff with Her Excellency Dr. Aricana Chihombori. After we discussed issues about Africa and African Union, the conversation shifted mostly to the diaspora and the role that it can play. As you know, Diaspora Network Television works closely with a lot of entities. The Diaspora Affairs Forum, headed by Ambassador Erica Bennett, who's a great friend of mine. Diaspora Affairs at the presidency, headed by my brother, Kwesi Ewa Abebio. All of us, we're looking at ways in which the diaspora can contribute. Now, I want to say this. When we train a focus on the diaspora, we are not, I repeat, we are not saying that the diaspora is the only group that can work to face Africa. We don't believe that. Nobody believes that. We just happen to believe that as we struggle as a continent to move forward, we have 210 million of us out there working every day to build other economies. And in many cases, they don't even respect us. Look at what they were doing in China, Africans in China. Look at the stuff that some presidents say about Africans, okay? So all these diaspora entities, one thing we share in common is that we think there's a huge role that people of African descent all around the globe can play in helping the continent move forward. They have the resources, they have the skill, money, everything. In Ghana alone, the Ghana diaspora brought in $4.7 billion in remittances in 2019. In 2020, who knows how much they're going to bring. There's talk about diaspora bond, which can raise just as much money as the Euro bonds that we engage in from time to time. And so the diaspora has a role to play. And fortunately, my friend Dr. Aricana Chihombori has started something that is pretty unique, the African Diaspora Development Institute. And so for next conversation, we centered on how we can bring it all together to help build Africa. So listen up. Here's the rest of my interview with her.
Okay, so now the diaspora. We, by our nature, by our name, Diaspora Network Television, you know where our heart is. You have just recently formed the African Diaspora Development Institute, ADDI. Please tell us about it. What does it stand for? What's its mission and vision?
ADDI means African Diaspora Development Institute. As you can imagine, in the entire existence of the African continent, outside Africa, there has not been an entity that we can all go to and speak with one voice and address the issues pertaining to Africa. To go to Africa, there's no one place that could go to get information about how to get into Africa. You got to go to each embassy to get information about that country. So ADDI is going to be a one-stop shop for those wanting to invest in Africa. Will open up opportunities for them. For those wanting to go to Africa as tourists, we'll help them, we'll assist them and advising them what places to go to. We are saying we are the one-stop shop. Even the heads of states and government, if they want to access the African diaspora, they can come through ADDI, and we'll link them to whatever services they're looking for within the diaspora. The same is true with the African diaspora. They can also come through ADDI to reach the continent and also understand more about the investment opportunities that are available. The first country we're going to go to, if we were not for Corona, was Zambia, where we were supposed to have a women's conference, a youth conference, and a diaspora conference. During that visit, we're also going to visit and officially do the ground digging for our Wakanda, which is the land that the president gave us a few years ago. We are also be opening our ADDI offices. Through the offices, we're going to leave the officers. We're going to continue to engage relationships between the African youth on the continent and the African youth in the diaspora. Also, the women on the continent, linking up with the women in the diaspora. So we can continue the conversations in terms of what we need to do to move our continent forward. And along the way, we're going to have a trade officer who's also going to look at all the opportunities in Zambia, because we are saying before the heads of states can take those contracts outside the continent and give the contract to the Chinese or the Europeans, must give those opportunities first to the diaspora. Give us the first right of refusal, because I do know that there are lots of diaspora companies that are capable of building airports, of building railway lines. We just have to know what opportunities are. And that is what ADDI is going to be doing. ADDI is going to be the bridge between the African heads of states and government and diaspora around the globe.
Very good. The last time I looked, there were 210 million people around outside the continent of Africa, people of African descent, that is. This includes African descendants of enslaved people, Suriname, all over the place. And then African immigrants who have traveled out and have had offspring, second, third generation. How is ADDI coordinating, putting all these people, different people in one basket for the purpose that you're looking to accomplish?
Okay. Yes, what we have now, the structure includes in Washington, D.C. We're going to have for the first year 5, we're calling them Africa houses, where we are going to be creating homes within the United States, where people of African descent can meet and discuss our issues. This is where we would let our young people, if they have issues, if they need jobs, if they need ideas about starting a business. There are too many of us who are in positions to help. We like to be able to float their desires out there, so those in leadership roles can also pick them up and assist them to the best that they can. We're simply taking a copy out of the Jewish playbook. We're also going to be opening ADDI in each region, starting with 5 this year, and then we'll open another 5 next year. We're going to be opening ADDI Beijing, 2 in Europe, 2 in the UK, 1 in Australia for the next 12 months. That is the plan. So we continue as we increase the ADDI offices. In Africa, we are going to start with 10, 2 in each region, ADDI offices. We're hoping we can open 10 in the next 12 months. That's how we're going to continue to communicate. When we enter into a country, We hope to work with the government so they can allow us access to all the investment opportunities. Zambia has actually stepped up to the plate. The team, the investment team, economic development team from Zambia, were actually supposed to be here in the States. We were supposed to be going to New York, Atlanta, Houston, Chicago, Minneapolis, and Los Angeles. We were averaging 150 to 200 businesses that were going to be by Zambia all the investment opportunities that has, and that would have the first right of refusal. Then when they pick what investment they want, a month later, we're all going to go to Zambia. They would have their meetings already set up with the ministries pertaining to their sector. So by the time they go to Zambia, they're already talking about taking their investment to a different level. So that's what we plan from one country to the other, to simply say, heads of states, you have been calling for your children in the diaspora for a long time. Now we are organized and we are ready to come home and play our part in building the Africa we want.
Okay. Recently, when the Chinese incident happened where they were mistreating Africans in China, in Guangzhou specifically, videos surfaced where people are making accusations that, oh, China wants African land without the people on it. If that is true, let's just say if that is true, then as ADDI goes to China to try and organize Africans in China, if I'm China, why should I help you to do that, knowing that if I help you to do that, you're going to adversely impact my mission in Africa? Why should I cooperate with you?
Well, actually, I don't need China to help us. We're simply going to China just like the Chinese are coming to Africa. We'll establish our office. We don't need Eddie to help us. We can help ourselves. We are going to China the same way that they're going to Africa. It is simple. We will not have Chinese telling us we cannot be in China when millions of Chinese are in Africa. That will not be tolerated. It is just that simple. We don't need any help from the Chinese. We're simply going to China to open our offices so we can continue to do our work just like the Chinese are going to also do what they need to be doing.
Very good. So how far is that going? How old is it now? And where do you see it 5 years from now, ADDI?
5 years from now, I will hope to see an ADDI that is in as many states as possible in this country, in as many countries as possible in Africa. I'd like to see diaspora who are fully engaged with the continent, taking over and taking their rightful place and making sure that the building of Africa, the agenda, the continental development agenda for Africa, led and driven by the African diaspora in collaboration with their brothers and sisters. You must understand, my brother, that you don't China and find Black people leading the Chinese development agenda. You don't go to Mexico, you don't go to India, you don't go to Europe and find Black people driving the development agenda for those regions. Therefore, you must not, should not, and Gali will not see non-Africans driving the African continental development agenda. We have got to take the driver's seat in the development of Africa. And that's why I will run around like a chicken without a head, letting every diaspora that needs to know this is the place that is waiting for you to take over. If you do not take it, then do not complain when the heads of states are giving contracts to the Chinese and to the Europeans and bypassing you because you refuse to be organized. The diaspora are the missing link in order for Africa to truly build a sustainable Africa free of exploitation. And that is the only way Africa can move forward.
Okay. Do you anticipate that the African embassies around the globe, do you think they will see you as collaborators or competition?
Collaborators, because the African diaspora that I'm reaching out to, we are looking at African Americans, Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Latino. If you are Black, you are an African, you are an African diaspora. I'm reaching out beyond what the embassies are doing. So there is no competition, it is collaboration.
Okay, very good. Now, let me bring you back to the continent. Are we making the necessary progress? Because there's a lot, when you look at, oh, Ghana is developing, all Nigeria is doing, but are we making progress from your opinion?
Oh, absolutely. We're making progress. As a matter of fact, in terms of investment, the returns on your money cannot be better than anywhere else than in Africa. People are making 10 to 20 returns on their investments. You will not get that anywhere in the Western world. So yes, we are making developments, albeit slow, but we are making developments. But again, I will emphasize, if we can just be free of the exploitation and manipulations out of the West, it will be a lot easier for Africa to move forward. If you look at the average African country, we're spending about 30% of the GDP on loan repayment. These loans are frivolous loans that have been paid 1,000 times over. These are games that are being played by IMF, by World Bank and other financial institutions. All that, we have to be very realistic and understand all those issues. How can a country spend 30% of their GDP on loan repayment? It's unacceptable. It is my humble that if I had a choice, I would just ask all African heads of states to stop paying their loans, because those loans have been paid over a gazillion times.
19, there is a lot that has changed the world. And for the first time, Africans who have money logged in foreign banks could not go to that money. Africans who are sick and who traditionally would say, oh, I'm going overseas for medical, that is COVID-19 a wake-up call that Africa needed?
Well, I can't say we needed COVID-19, absolutely. We did not need COVID-19, but it is an equalizer. What COVID-19 is reminding us, that when it's all said and done, e pluribus unum, we are one. Regardless of the color of your skin, regardless of your socio-economic status, regardless of your nationality, we are all humans under God. And when COVID comes in, COVID doesn't care how much money you have in your bank. It doesn't care what the color of your skin. I think COVID-19 is an equalizer that is reminding us as humanity. And for Africa, I think if we work in a collaborative way, we can find an Africa that's going to improve COVID-19 with a significantly improved healthcare system, with an Africa that's slowly beginning to manufacture our own healthcare products. For example, we have started a COVID-19 fundraising, and our plan is to pay the locals to sew the masks and the surgical gowns, because there's no need for us to buy them when we have our own tailors and seamstresses who can do a great job of sewing these needed PPEs. So I'm hoping that if this COVID is done in a continental level, in an organized way, Africa can see herself in a totally different place as far as our healthcare system, as well as our manufacturing industry.
Okay. In Africa, in doing diaspora advocacy, which I've been doing for over 2 decades now, I see clearly that when it comes to Africans on the continent and the African diaspora, it's almost like an us versus them type of thing. Why do you think that we don't see each other as one people facing the same destiny? Why does it always have to be us versus them? Those diasporans, we on the continent. Why?
Okay, talking about the diaspora versus Africans on the continent?
Yes. Why do we see ourselves as two people, us versus them, type of engagement?
Absolutely. When you look at us diaspora in Ghana, as you know, those diaspora who've been outside the country, you guys refer to us as Bintus. I've been to the US, I've been to the Kingdom, I've been to Australia. We go home with an attitude, and we think we're better than our brothers and sisters on the continent because we've been to. I heard the last one in Burundi, they call them come from. So these come froms, they think they know more than the ones on the ground. Now, our brothers and sisters on the ground, they don't take that very lightly. So they too start responding to these Bintus and the come-froms. They need an attitude adjustment coming from us, the diaspora. I always tell people, when you go home, pack your suitcases chock full of humility, or to my brothers and sisters on the continent, they're also worried that in some cases, this diaspora are coming to take their jobs. Far from it. Now, I do say, as Africans in the diaspora, we must also plan on going home as job creators, not job seekers. We must pull our funds together and invest so we can employ ourselves as well as our brothers and sisters. To think you can spend 10, 15, 20 years in the United States or Europe and then want to go home and compete for jobs with our brothers and sisters who are already on the continent is not fair. Now, if you're bringing in expertise that the country doesn't have, that's a different story. But I think we can unite and go home as job creators, not as job seekers. So it's a lot of misunderstandings between Africans on the continent and Africans in the diaspora. All that can be through dialogue. And also from the side of the diaspora, it's about humility, humility, and humility. To whom much is given, much is expected.
Well, our own survey, Diaspora Network Television, our survey indicates that Ghanaians, we did it with the Ghanaian community, 80% want to come home at some point. And of that 80%, 60.3 wanted to create jobs. Only 4% wanted private jobs and 4% wanted public jobs. So you're right. Majority of Africans who live abroad, when they come home, they want to indulge in private business and employ people. But there are a lot of examples where they will tell you that when they came in to create jobs, people made it so frustrating for them, even in their very innocent intentions, without this being too attitude. They still couldn't make it because of frustration that people seem to enjoy taking you through. So which is which? Is it the Bintu's fault, or is it the locals' fault, or is it a combination of both, and that we should work together?
It looks now case of the chicken and the egg. I think at the end of the day, both sides should shoulder the blame. We need to realize that we must work together. This is again another role that we hope ADDI can play in making sure that as diaspora get into a country, we're going into the country at the highest level, and we make sure that the opportunities are clearly delineated. And again, I keep saying, as diaspora, don't go home by yourself, trying to make it by yourself. You'll use up all your retirement. It's about collaboration. We're no more going to talk about me. And that's another problem we have as Black people. We need to collaborate. Let's pull our funds together. Let's invest in these big opportunities, contracts that need millions of dollars. It's about collaboration. And that's what ADDI is going to be advocating and encouraging diaspora to do. When you go home as a united front, you are more likely to succeed.
Okay. Well, there's one there is one interesting example that I'll throw in here. One time I was walking into a restaurant, right? And the restaurant, there was a security guy at the gate. I greeted him, he greeted me back, and then put his hand like this. I opened the door and I got in. Right behind me was a white couple. I saw that he greeted them, and then he opened the door for them. Now, maybe it's me, but do you see a lot of that on the continent?
No, it's not you. There's a lot of it. I think that's when sometimes I say the things that we do as Black people are so stupid. Sometimes I'm embarrassed. I've had many such incidents happen to me personally. It's very sad. Again, we are still suffering from the legacy of slavery. And that, again, lies our problems. When you take the same person with such a mentality and you put them in a boardroom across from a white person, they then start buckling in. They can almost pee on themselves because they get scared. How do you go in as a manager, as an administrator, as a person in leadership role? You're afraid of white people. How do you negotiate with them? That's why we are always losing on the negotiating table. That's probably part of what happened when the Chinese first came to Africa. We were just accepting whatever contracts they were giving us without really reading through and making sure that we are negotiating in the best interest of the country. So, but now, thank goodness, the leaders have picked up on that. They are dealing with it. A lot of bad contracts are being cancelled, but we must realize to extend we Black people still suffering from the legacy of slavery, and too many of us are afraid of white people. They feel inferior to white people. That has got to change. We cannot stress it enough that we Black people, we are the origin of humanity. We as Black women, we gave birth to the first human being. Without a Black woman, there would not be any other races. That is a reason why we can stand on the tallest mountain and proclaim to the world who we are. We are the original people, and therefore no one can treat us as being inferior. Every Black person must know that. So we are not inferior to anyone, and we should not tolerate anyone trying to treat us like we are inferior. We should rise up and push back. That is not going to be tolerated anymore. Like what is happening in China. We will not take it lying down. Absolutely not.
Okay, very good. Before we go, finally, Africa's place in the world today versus Africa's place in the world 20 years from now. What do you see? Look in a crystal ball and tell us, what do you see?
Well, if we do the right things, if we plan, you look at an Africa that is feeding the world. We still have 65% of the arable land. Africa can feed the entire world. Africa can provide natural resources as finished goods to the entire world. There is nothing Africa needs outside with the extent of the expertise. And in our case, the expertise can come from the African diaspora. We're not saying we don't want foreign direct investment. Absolutely not. We just want to let them to know that the Westerners and those from the East, when they come to Africa, they must understand that Black people are going to be on the driver's seat. Just like a Black man does not lead a Chinaman to China, a Chinaman must not lead a Black man to Africa. When going to Africa, they must understand, those from the West and those from the East, that they have to come behind a Black man, because for us, Africa is home, and we demand to be on the driver's seat of the African Continental Development Agenda. So I see an Africa that is thriving, an Africa that is now a first world with all its children living happily on our beloved continent, in harmony with others from other parts of the world. But they must understand that they have got to respect the African. We will not have it any other way. Those who don't think they can respect the Africans, we humbly ask them to get out of the continent. You are not welcome. But those who are ready to respect the Africans, they're very welcome. We can live together in harmony.
My sister, it's always such a pleasure. I love you, and I really appreciate you but I'm going to put you on the spot before I let you go, and I hope you forgive me for this. It is 2030.
That all depends.
It is the year 2030, and somehow the current leadership in Africa, all of them, now we're going to vote for one of them to become the leader of Africa. Who has your vote? The current leadership.
It depends on how many of them are still going to be president. Because remember, between now and 2030, there are going to be lots of elections, and so it's very difficult.
Yeah, but if all of them, all of them now, the current presidents now, if we were voting now, who has your vote?
Well, I tell you, that's going to be a very difficult decision to make, because I love all of them. And I think if we work with all of them, they'll all make great leaders. So it'll be a very difficult decision. I love all my presidents. And I'm sorry, my brother, I don't think I could have a choice, not at this time.
Okay. I knew I wasn't going to get an answer anyway. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, my brother, for having me. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Take care.
As you can see, we've only just begun. If you never believed in Africa until now, well, now is the time to do it, because we are coming back. Africa is about to stand up. The millions and millions of people who are underprivileged, who are struggling, they're counting on the rest of us. They're counting on the leadership. They're counting on what the diaspora can bring in to help change this continent. For me, I don't know about you, but when I drive around in Ghana, And when I look at footages of the rest of the continent, it speaks to us. It speaks about us. And at some point, we need to really stand up and say, enough is enough. This is where we start to take the destiny of Africa into our own hands. I'd like to thank you for watching. Thank my producer, Samuel Osuasari, MCR, Philip Hammond, and all the guys who played a role to make this a successful show. And my biggest thank goes to Iron Lady, my friend, Her Excellency Dr. Aricana Chihombori Kwao, for spending such great time with us. This has been Diaspora Weekly. We thank you for watching. Goodbye.